Week 1 of the NFL's preseason is in the books. Week 2 of the NFL preseason starts on Thursday night with a pair of games. Let's break them both down right here, right now. We'll talk about the Raiders and the Texans. We'll talk about the Chargers and the 49ers. Ted Safransky, Teddy covers WagerTalk.com with a double gamer for Thursday. And let me start with a little recap of last week, because honestly, we saw something last week that we don't often see. 2025 was the highest scoring week 1 preseason ever. And then the 2026 Hall of Fame game flew over the total by 4 touchdowns. It was as over as over gets. What happened this past weekend? The market's corrected. Unders 12-4 in week 1 of the NFL preseason after week 1 flew over last year and flew over in the Hall of Fame game. Dogs 12-4 underdogs in week 1 ATS, and at +2 or higher, there are a bunch of games priced near pick'em, just like there are this week. But at +2 or higher, underdogs 10-2 ATS last week. So the markets right now, at least early in preseason, we've seen unders and underdogs. What are we going to see on Thursday night? Let's start with the Raiders and the Texans. And right now, look at the Odds Logic live odds screen. Mixes 1.5 and 2s out there for Houston. Total 40.5. We've seen over money come for this ball game, and the over money's come at some sharp books. That's fine. I don't see an over in this ball game. I'm going to explain why. Right now, for the Raiders, obviously we have a battle for the starting quarterback job between Kirk Cousins, the veteran, and Fernando Mendoza, the rookie. And Cousins is likely to start to open the season, and if things break right for the Raiders, Mendoza doesn't get a whole lot of snaps before December. I'll just put it like that. That being said, in the preseason, both these guys are likely to get a fair bit of action, although considering how the joint practices looked this past week, the joint practices for the Raiders and the Texans, the reports were very one-sided. Houston looked like the playoff team, and the Raiders looked like the rebuilding team, and that was on both sides of the football. But in particular, the Raiders' offensive line got annihilated by the Texans' defensive line. There was no time for Cousins to throw. There was no time for Mendoza to throw. And frankly, if that continues into this game, which on paper, this is an absolute mismatch. Houston doesn't have a good defensive line. They have one of the best defensive lines in the NFL, and they're deep. They go, second unit is good. The third unit is good for Houston. The Raiders' offensive line is a unit of weakness. The backup offensive line is a unit of bigger weakness. If you watched them play against Arizona last week in the second half, the offensive line couldn't block anyone. The second stringers, the third stringers. Similar story in practice this week, in the joint practices. So, yes, Cousins and Mendoza are supposed to get ample playing time here. If the Raiders can't block the Texans, we're going to see a lot of Aiden O'Connell, who was not good last week. And O'Connell may have a better game in him than the one we just saw for the Raiders. But it is certainly a scenario where we're projecting before kickoff, the Raiders are going to have an offensive line problem against this pass rush, against this front for the Texans. And that offensive line problem is likely to persist throughout the course of the ballgame. It's not something that, once the starters come out, the Raiders will be fine. I'm not convinced that's the case. So while the Raiders have 3 QBs, and in general, you like an Aiden O'Connell coming in the second half of these games. You like a guy who started in the NFL, who has plenty of experience. You want a guy like him in the second half of ballgames. I don't know that I want Aiden O'Connell in this situation with a weak offensive line in front of him playing. Even the third stringer for the Texans, Michael Ryan, has depth on that defense. That's a team that's expecting big things this season. And really, when we read the quotes coming out of Houston, it's a hungry, focused team right now. Kubiak after the joint practices, by the way, we all know we're not anywhere near where we want to be. We just got to keep getting better. All right. So the Texans had been 5-1 the last preseason games under DeMeco Ryan before the Chargers killed them last week. And the reason the Chargers killed them last week was because Houston, the Chargers played a good game, no question. But it was supposed to be Davis Mills and then Graham Mertz. Mills started, he threw a touchdown pass, everything was fine, he played with the offensive line. And then Mertz got hurt, and Mills was forced back in the game. They had no game plan for him in the second half. They just handed the ball off. They weren't really worried about because of the quarterback issues. This week, Stroud and the starters are supposed to at least get a cup of coffee. I don't know how long they're going to play. We haven't heard exactly how long they're going to play. The market thinks they're going to play a fair bit. hence the 40.5 total for this ballgame. But the bottom line for the Texans, they have been a pretty good preseason team under Ryans, and they are a team that should be able to control the line of scrimmage against the Raiders. That being said, Mertz is now out for the year. All right, Stroud's going to play a little bit. We're going to see some Davis Mills. The question is, what happens after that? Last week they brought in Jake Hayner and Seth Hennigan for tryouts, and they said, we don't want either one of you guys. When Mertz got hurt, they signed Brett Rippon. So does Rippon play this week? If he does, he doesn't have a whole lot of experience in this offense. He's coming off the street a week ago. I'm not convinced that's a bet-on scenario. That being said, I do lean Houston in this ballgame, and I do lean under Texans and under. That's the way I'm looking in the first one of this. Don't know if either yet is going to be a client play. That's how we record the videos early and we think about it. We see where the markets move. So check out my homepage, www.buzz.com/TC. Visit the website at WagerTalk.com to see if this play ends up, or one of those two selections, either Houston or under, ends up making my card. It's the website again, www.buzz.com/TC. And really, we've talked about it a fair bit. I want to talk about if you want to partner up this football season before I talk about the 49ers and the Chargers. My NFL season win report is out. It's 105-56 over the last 25 years, 17-5 with the 5% big ticket reports over the last 25 years. I'm looking for a big season in the NFL this year. Last year was not up to my expectations. We've tweaked in the offseason, and we're not tweaking. We've tweaked our process in the offseason. Just we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. It's little iterations. How do we fix things? How do we make sure that we're back on the right track? And I'm confident this is going to be a good season. If you want to partner up, you can get the whole year $5.99. That includes the win report, every preseason play, every regular season play, every postseason play, the Super Bowl, the prop report. No nonsense. But take $50 off. Promo code Teddy50 at checkout. We'll get you $50 off my full NFL season. You get the whole deal, $5.49 right now. Again, wt.buzz.com/TC. Or just visit WagerTalk.com. Use that promo code Teddy50 at checkout. Take the $50 off. I also want to talk about the Splash Sports contest, the $21 million Survivor contest that a bunch of WagerTalk guys are in, myself included. It's cool. It's there. So 35 states are legal, but even if you're not in one of those 35 states, you can still go to the neighboring state and come back like I did here in Nevada. I signed up when I was on vacation. I'm like, all right, we'll sign up on vacation. But you can sign up anywhere and then play all year. No proxy, okay? You don't need to play. I respect the contest here in Vegas, but you got to have a proxy if you're going to have a contest here in Vegas. No proxy needed here. No flight to Vegas, no hotel room, no Saturday deadline. You can submit right until kickoff. And, of course, you can plan ahead. You can submit all 18 weeks before the season starts if you want. And don't have to worry about it. You don't have to miss a pick. You won't miss a deadline. Conceptually, it's a really good contest. SplashSports.com/WagerTalk. Use the code WagerTalk. You get $100 off. $100 to use on other contests for the Splash Sports Survivor. Again, SplashSports.com/WagerTalk. Promo code WagerTalk to get that $100 of credit. The Niners and the Chargers, Thursday Night Football, the late game here on the left coast. We're looking at the Odds Logic live odds screen. San Fran -1, -1.5. It's a split. There's more 1.5s than ones. But, we're talking about picking hairs. -1, 1.5, 38.5 the total for San Fran, LA on Thursday. And really, the Chargers have been a very good preseason team under Harbaugh in recent years, just like his brother was a pretty good preseason coach. They have scored 22 points or more in each of the last 6 preseason games since 2024. All right. 5 overs out of those 6 games. And they would have gone over last week, but Houston lost their quarterback before halftime and didn't score. The Texans only got a touchdown in that ballgame, so that ended up staying under the total. But from a team total standpoint, Chargers have been over in each of the last 6 preseason games. And from a game total, over in 5 of the 6. The only one was when Houston lost their QB. So this has been an offense that has worked in August. Obviously, you had the big injury, in camp or in the joint practice earlier this week with Tyler Biatz. I hate that guy's last name. Biatz, the center, the Pro Bowl center who they just brought in It's the Chargers offensive line that just hasn't been able to stay healthy. They bring in the Pro Bowl center, and of course he gets hurt in the joint practice. That is a impact injury for LA. Don't underestimate it. That being said, when you have teams starting to get injuries in August and key injuries in August, the game plan tends to calm down a little bit. And while the Chargers scored 22 plus in each of the last 6 preseason games, does that continue here? We like the QB rotation. Herbert or no Herbert. Trey Lance, by the way, Herbert doesn't look like he's going to play here. But that's not yet 100% confirmed. I don't think he's going to play. But Trey Lance and DJ Uiagalelei, that's a good backup QB duo. Why? Well, both guys can make plays with their feet. Both guys can throw downfield. Between them, they averaged 9.8 yards per pass attempt last week and only got sacked twice. Again, this is an offense that has worked in August in each of the last 3 years, and it worked last week. Will work against San Francisco. Maybe the 49ers last week had, Curtis Work had that great first half, and then he got hurt right before the break. They're likely to have Brock Purdy play in this ball game. And Brock Purdy, who had a rough joint practice, at least the first one of the two, he was under pressure. He took hits, what was his quote? Honestly, I don't feel like it was our best day. I felt like our fundamentals and stuff were just a little bit off and whatnot. Just feel like we could have come out with a bit more of a chip on our shoulder offensively. Mac Jones, the backup, threw an interception in the joint practices with LA. And a lot of times, what you see in the joint practices is not necessarily what you're going to see in the games. The teams that do well in joint practices, the pressure's off. The teams that didn't do well in the joint practices, they got something to prove. They come with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. But in this instance, here's San Fran. Purdy didn't play well in practice. Mac Jones didn't play well in practice. The Chargers have been scoring points in bunches. The Chargers have a QB rotation we like in the second half of these ball games. What are we looking here? Over the total. 38.5 seems very reasonable to this better in a game that has all the makings. I'm not going to call it a high-flying shootout, but, if both teams get to 20, we cash. And I expect both teams will get to 20 in this one. Give me the 49ers and the Chargers over the total. Give me the Texans and the under in that one. And again, visit my homepage, www.buzz.tc. Visit WagerTalk.com. See if any of these make my client card for the weekend. Check it out right now. And thanks for watching WagerTalk TV. Stay tuned right here on this channel for more quality video content. And boy, guys, we genuinely appreciate the comments, the likes, the follows. Makes all the difference. Have a great day. Thanks for watching WagerTalk TV.